traits that people who grew up in a different world had without even reading a book. SubhanAllah. Are we good to go? Okay, Bismillah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Ramadan Mubarak to all of you. This is our first Rawha of Ramadan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us on this first day of Ramadan. Bless us to be able to taste the sweetness of fasting, to move up in its degrees. Ya Arhamar Rahimin. And bless us to worship out of love and longing for our Lord, Ya Arhamar Rahimin. And may Allah ta'ala, that through the blessings of our shuyukh, as that bless us to be able to fast in a way that is pleasing to Him. And inshallah, this is a month that is filled with worship and good deeds. And may Allah Ta'ala give us good health and give us strength, give us determination, and inshallah, bless us to make righteous intentions to benefit the most. So inshallah, during these sessions, we're going to be covering a very blessed book written by one of the greatest scholars of Islam, Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala. And in Arabic, the book is titled At-Tibyan fi Adab Hamalat al-Quran. And it is translated and written in English as Etiquette with the Quran by a friend and a scholar, Sheikh Musa Ferber. May Allah Ta'ala that bless him, protect him, preserve him, and continue to benefit through him. And so the full title, An Exposition on the Etiquette of the Bearers of the Quran. So we'll come back to this, inshallah ta'ala. Today we're going to primarily look at the biography of Imam An-Nawawi, because he's such an important scholar and he's such a great exemplar for us as people who are, we can't even claim that we're students of knowledge, but we are trying to emulate true students of knowledge. I remember Sheikh Hamza, may Allah preserve him, always saying is that if we would rewind a little bit in Islamic history, is that we wouldn't even be accepted to be able to give service to the people who are studying, let alone to actually be students of knowledge, because the bar was so high, and how you had to be in order to really be a student of knowledge. But yallah, that we try our best to resemble them. One of the blessed lines of poetry is that فَلَمْ تَكُونُوا مِثْلَهُمْ فَتَشَبَّهُوا. If you can't be like them, then at least try to resemble them. فَإِنَّ التَّشَبُّهَ بِالْكِرَامِ الْفَلَاحُ. Because that trying to emulate honorable people is success in and of itself. And Ahmad Aydrus has this breakdown of the true people of Allah, is that those who've arrived to the knowledge of Allah, those who are actively treading their path, and then you have what he calls the mutashabbih, the mutashabbih. The mutashabbih is the one who's trying to resemble those who've attained knowledge of Allah and they're traveling their path. And then the one who's trying to resemble the one who's trying to resemble them is someone who loves them. At least we love them. And if you can add to that love of them and belief in their path, that's sa'adah. Imam Haddad says, Mahabbatum sa'adah. The love of them is felicity. So we want to at least love them and believe in their path. And whether that be for the talib al-ilm, the student of knowledge, or the salik, the one who is treading the path to draw near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're not mutually exclusive, both go hand in hand. And what we ideally want is to be on both fronts at the same time. And as our teachers very conveniently have summarized for us our approach to the deen, ilm, suluk, and da'wah. We want to have that a pursuit of knowledge, a traveling of the spiritual path, and a offering of service in its broadest meaning simultaneously. And that collectively actually is the path. And this is especially for people who are living in this time, is that if we can understand that and to put that into practice, this is the key that opens up high degrees of closeness to Allah. And if you think that you can't attain a high degree of closeness to Allah Ta'ala, not in relation to your own self. When we think about our own selves, and khalas, what can we ever attain if you think about our lazy own selves? But if you think about it in relation to the bounty of Allah, you're actually having a bad opinion of Allah. Just as we mentioned last week in the khutbah, you're having a bad opinion of Allah. If you don't think that He can forgive you for even major sins, you're actually having a bad opinion of Allah. If you don't think you can reach the heights of the spiritual path. But again, not in of yourself, that through the bounty of Allah Ta'ala. So inshallah, there'll be that blessed time that we spend together in this, that blessed month. And so we wanted to start today with the tarjama, the biography of Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah, because he's such an important scholar of Islam. And he's one of the universally accepted scholars of Islam. And he's one of those people that if there's a few books that Muslims tend to have on their shelves across the board, you tend to find a few copies of different works of his, radiallahu anhu. And so you should have your copies by now of the translation. That someone was going to take care of it for the students. The other copies, I think, we're going to, they'll be available, inshallah, after class. So we'll look at the biography of Imam An-Nawawi today, and inshallah, to get more into the book as of tomorrow. So what is this great Imam's name? So now if you go to your page, I have a different pagination, so that if you look at the brief biography of Imam An-Nawawi, he mentions his name is Yahya ibn Sharaf Muhyiddin Abu Zakaria An-Nawawi. Okay? And so when you say his Abu Zakaria, he's the father of Zakaria. And usually in Arabic, that's the one that you're actually going to start with. You always put the kunya first, and there's an ordering that you learn in the Arabic language of what you mention first. And so he's Yahya ibn Sharaf. His father's was named Sharaf. And Muhyiddin is his epithet, right? Abu Zakaria is his agnomen, and his kunya. And An-Nawawi means that he's from the village of Nawa. It's a short drive from the blessed city of Damascus. But you can also say Nawa. So he's Nawi or Nawawi. Both are correct pronunciations of his name, radiallahu anhu. And so that I'm going to be pausing at certain points and going to one of the greatest, actually the greatest source of his biography, which is from the student of Imam Nawawi by the name of Ibn Attar. So Ibn Attar was a great Imam in of himself. He passes away in the year 724, and his name is Adi ibn Ibrahim ibn Dawood ibn Sulaiman. And the reason I'm doing this is you're going to have windows into the scholarship of Islam through this, how precise they were of the names. They didn't just mention one name. Ali bin Ibrahim bin Dawood, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather, bin Salman. Yukanna, his kunya is Abul Hasan. And he's known as, yu'raf bi, al-Sheikh Ala-ad-Din ibn Attar, al-Shafi. And he's that commonly given the nickname Mukhtasar al-Nawawi. He was so close to Imam Nawawi. And because he spent an extended period of time with him. Wa khadamahu, and he served him, wa intafa'a bih, and he benefited from him greatly, and he witnessed firsthand many blessed accounts of his piety. So he knew Imam An-Nawawi up close. And so that the likes of Imam As-Sakhawi says is that this biography of his that was compiled by this great Imam Ibn Attar is the standard for all of the other biographies that came after him, because he was so close to him. And you get these intimate glimpses into the life of this blessed Imam because of this. So he adds he says he's Abu Zakaria Yahya ibn al-Shaykh al-Zahid al-Wara' Waliyullah Abi Yahya Sharaf ibn Murri. So even his father, whose name was Sharaf, his father was also someone who was pious. And that his father, Sharaf ibn Murri, was a dukkaniyan, yani that he had a store where he used to buy and sell to his store. And that Imam al-Dhahabi says about it, kana shaykhan mubarakan, is that he was a blessed shaykh. Naam. And he says, وَلَمَّا مَاتْ سَنَةً 685, so he passed after Imam Nawawi. His father, Imam Nawawi, passed after Imam Nawawi. So his father passes away in the year 685. Sulli alayhi salat al-ghaib, is that they prayed that salat al-ghaib, which is according to some schools, permissible if someone passes away in a distant place that you can't reach, the way that the Prophet ﷺ prayed upon Najashi. And they say that this indicates is that he was well known for his piety. The fact that people were inspired to pray at a distance, even though they weren't present there upon him. And so he lived 9 years after his son. And so we'll learn things about him in terms of the birth of Imam An-Nawawi. So Imam An-Nawawi was born in the year 631 and returns to Allah in the year 676. So he says he's the pious, the ascetic, the most learned, scrupulously God-wary, accomplished jurisprudent and hadith master, the impeccable Shaykh of Islam by the unanimity of the people of Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, fearless before kings, lordly here with a lowercase l means he was someone entirely devoted to Allah, and chaste. He who died young, yet in a short life of 45 years, produced works of learning that made him the principal authority in the later Shafi'i school. So in the Shafi'i school, it's actually quite easy. If Imam An-Nawawi and Imam Rafi'i agree upon an opinion, that's the dominant opinion in the Shafi'i school. He was that authoritative. And if they differ, you give preference to the opinion of Imam Nawawi. And then in the later opinions that weren't treated by those two great Imams, then you have the two great scholars of Sheikh Ibn Hajar and Sheikh Al-Ramli. But he was this authoritative where when he said this was the opinion in the Shafi'i school, this is the dominant opinion if Imam Nawawi says it. So he goes on to say, he is the standard bearer of the awliya of Allah, the friends of God. Imam Dhahabi said this about him. And he himself said, Allah has blessed me in the right use of my time. This is one of the hopes, is that by reading his story, we'll be inspired to see how he passed away at the age of 45. So there's some of us in this room that are older than Imam Nawawi. What have we accomplished in our life? And look, he passed away at age 45, and he accomplished everything he accomplished. There was barakah and blessing in his years. So it's not how long you live, it's how much blessing is in your life. And so he says that Allah has blessed me in the right use of my time, in reference to Imam Nawawi's remarkable scholarly output and achievements. Imam Nawawi is named after his hometown of Nawa, near Damascus. Imam Sakhawi said the following, he is the spiritual pole of the noble friends of Allah. So not only was he an outward scholar, he was known for his piety and his reaching this great station in the internal hierarchy of the awliya. The reviver of the sunnah and the slayer of innovation. Allahu Akbar. Yeah, it's probably mumit al-bid'ah. May Allah bestow great and endless mercy on him, bless him, and reward him on behalf of every Muslim. So now we're going to read a little bit about his early education. Before we do that, there's a story that is not mentioned here that the great Imam Ibn Attar mentions. And he says, وَذَكَرَ لِي وَالِدُهُ. So the father of Imam An-Nawawi mentioned the story to the Shaykh Ibn Attar. He says that one time, on one night, as Imam An-Nawawi, my son, was sleeping next to me. And he was only about 7 years old. And it just happened to be the 27th night of the month of Ramadan. And he said that I woke up at about midnight. Okay. And he says that my son had woke me up. And he says, Ya abati, oh father, ma hadha al-daw alladhi qad mala ad-dar? What is all this light that is radiating in the house? And so everybody else ended up waking up in the house, and he's describing this light, and he said that none of us saw anything. He said, then his father said, فَعَرَفْتُ أَنَّهَا لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ. I realized that it was Laylat al-Qadr. Yeah, and he was a young boy, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had removed the veil for him. And keep in mind what we just took in Imam Haddad's book of assistance, that there's some people who Allah lifts the veil from the heart, and at least, again, we have to love the people of this path and believe this is possible, where they can see things happening such that they know it's Laylat al-Qadr. And he said one of those things, Imam Haddad says, you see things in prostration to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And other people might witness immense spiritual light. And spiritual light is not like this light, right? But just as someone who is physically blind cannot see this light, someone who's spiritually blind, which is ourselves, we fail to see spiritual light. So you need spiritual sight to see spiritual light. And Imam An-Nawawi was given this ability from the time that he was young. And then there is this other blessed story where he says here, وقال الشيخ ابن عطار عليه رحمة الله ذكر لي الشيخ ياسين بن يوسف المراكشي. So if you even look at the stories they mention who told them the story. So the vast majority of stories that we memorize, we forget who told us those stories, or that the story gets changed because it wasn't related to us properly. Whereas these people, and the real ulama, is that they were concerned with sanad even in relation to stories. So he says that Sheikh Yasin bin Yusuf al-Marakashi, the scholar, who was a person of Allah, said that I saw Sheikh Muhyiddin, yani Imam An-Nawawi, and he was 10 years old. I saw him in Nawa. وَالصِّبْيَانِ يُكْرِهُونَ عَلَى اللَّعْبِ مَعَهُمْ. The other children that were his age were forcing him to play with them. وَهُوَ يَهْرُبُ. And he was trying to run away. He didn't want to play with the kids. And that he would cry that if he ever was forced to have to play the games that kids play. Now, there's nothing wrong with kids playing, but this just shows you he was different. And that he would, even though he'd be forced to play with them, he'd be reciting Quran as he's playing with them. So the Sheikh says is that Allah Ta'ala places love in my heart for him. This young man is different. This young man is different. And so he said, then at some point his father would have him work in the shop. This was very common. You see this still to this day in the Muslim world. If you own a shop, even young kids, 10, 15 years old, they're like way more mature than kids this age. They're buying and they're selling and they're doing things for their father. They're holding down the store if their father has to go somewhere. So he says is that his father wanted him to work in the store. But he said is that he was so preoccupied that with recitation of the Quran, it became hard for him to buy and sell on the behalf of his father. So he says that his father says, I brought him to someone that would then teach him the Quran and to learn it fully. And I advised him to take good care of him. And then that this blessed that Sheikh said, is that هذا الصبي يرجى أن يكون أعلم أهل زمانه. He said, this young boy, is that it's hoped that he will be the most knowledgeable of the people of his time. وَأَزْهَدِهِمْ. Look at that. And the one that detaches from the world the most, that has the most zuhd. So not just in terms of ilm, but also in terms of spiritual state. Khalas. Zuhd. Azhadim. He'll be the most detached of people. وَيَنْتَفَعَ النَّاسِ بِهِ. And people will benefit from him. So this blessed Sheikh, when Imam Nawawi came to him, this is what he said about him. فَقَالَ لِي أَمُنَجِّمٌ أَنْتَ. So then someone said in response to this, is like, are you an astrologer? Like, where is this coming from? He says, لا وَإِنَّمَا أَنْتَقَنِي اللَّهُ بِذَلِكَ. No, Allah Ta'ala that brought this to my heart and made me say this. And so that they came back and they told his father about what the Sheikh had said about Imam Nawawi. And so that he then made sure that that raised him in the right way and that set him aside for religious study and didn't preoccupy him with the things of this world. And so again, this shows us how to, though, that being around the right people early on, the vast majority of us, if someone has the ability to really learn, and you take him to someone like, no, make him become a doctor, right? No, he should become a businessman. No, send him to this university. And there's nothing wrong with being a doctor or businessman or anything like that. But the way people think is totally different. People that have the aptitude to actually, that really study the sacred sciences, is people tend to, that push them to things where they can benefit in a material way in relation to their money. So he had a good father. And his father that looked after him very carefully. And then he had finished the Quran completely before coming of age. No. طيب. So then we'll read this section of his early education and teachers. So Imam An-Nawawi came to Damascus in 649. So that's when he was about 18 years old. And lived in the Madrasa Al-Rawahiyya. In 4.5 months, he memorized Abu Ishaq al-Shirazi's manual of Shafi fiqh entitled At-Tanbih, and a quarter of Abu Ishaq's Al-Muhadhab fil Madhab with his Sheikh Ishaq ibn Ahmed al-Maghribi. After which he went on the pilgrimage with his father, ailing during most of the trip, so that he was very sick when he went on this trip. For most of the trip he was sick. And look at what his father says. So again, Sheikh Ibn Attar heard this directly from his father. He says that when we left from Rawha to go to the pilgrimage, he says that he got a fever as soon as we left that remained with him that all the way till Yom Arafah. And he said, وَقَالَ وَلَمْ يَتَأَوَّهْ قَطْ. Right? He never sighed out of being sick, let alone complain about his fever, right? Ta'awwah is like, or something like that, let alone to complain outwardly. And he's a young man. It just shows these people are different. Is that he was ailing during most of the trip and never even sighed. SubhanAllah. And so then he goes on to say, and took up residence in Medina for 1.5 months and then returned to Damascus. So after this, he returns to Damascus. And then again, going back to Ibn Attar, he says, is that Imam An-Nawawi himself told him that when I was 19 years old, is that I went to Damascus in the year 99. And in the year 649. And then he mentions the Madrasa Rawahiyya. And he says, I remained for 2 years, lam ada' jambi ala al-ard. For 2 whole years while he was studying, he never put his side on the ground. He never laid down to sleep. He would sleep sitting down, and just only enough to like ghafawat, just a little bit here and there. Now we're not recommending this. You won't be able to do this. You'll do this for 1 or 2 days, and then you'll be out for that 3 or 4, if not 5, right? All we're asking is that you go to bed on time and not watch Netflix, or get off social media and get to bed early. That's all we're asking. Not that you only sleep 15 minutes a day and don't put your side on the ground. But this is the way that, the point here though is that people that achieve great things, there's a certain way they are when they're young. And the teacher of Habib Muhammad Abdullah Haddar, he had brought a bed, some form of bedding. And when he came from Al-Bayda to study in the Ribat Tarim, and after, I believe it was 5 years of studying, they said that he never even opened up his bedding that entire period. He preferred to sleep on something that was, and subhanAllah, I remember when I was in Mauritania, I had my roommate, my tent mate rather, his name was Mustafa, and it was really, really cold in the winter, really cold, like desert, bone, aching cold. And there's 2 types of blankets they had. Both were Chinese blankets. One of them was like one that was like almost like it itched your skin. It was so it wasn't comfortable, right? And it wasn't very thick. And then they had another like really deluxe one that was like super soft and like warm. So I bought the nice soft one, right? Just because it was so cold. But my roommate, he wouldn't even use the cheap one. 6 days a week, he would just cover himself in his Mauritanian outfit, the dara, and that was it. I'm saying it was cold. But every time I'd wake up, he'd already be up. Every single day, waking up for tahajjud and then reviewing his lawh, yani before fajr. Every single day. The only day was the one night on the day off, he would use the cheaper blanket. And that's it. During the school week, nope. Khalas. And again, he's someone who turned out to be very special. People that are like this, when they study, they turn out to be special. Your habits that you're developing now as students will determine how successful you are in your studies, let alone everything that comes after it. And these are the type of things, type of habits that you and I went at. For 2 years, he did not put his side on the ground. And his father, when they got back from the pilgrimage from Hajj, says, once we finished the rites, we came back to Nawa. Then we went to Damascus. And he said, Sabballahu alayhi al-ilma sabba. Allah poured knowledge upon Imam An-Nawawi. This is his father saying this about his son. And then he says, وَلَمْ يَزَلْ يَشْتَغَلْ بِالْعِلْمِ. And that continue to preoccupy himself with knowledge. And that learn from his teachers. And that not just that knowledge, but also ibadah, from fasting and praying and the meanings of zuhd and wara', right? How to detach from this world and how to be scrupulousness and how not to waste any time. And so this is what happens. This is what we want to learn, is that how to use our time well. A student of knowledge should not waste any time ever. And if we're not actively studying, we should be worshiping. If we're not actively worshiping, we should be doing something else of benefit. And even if we're doing something to relax, which is fine, is that we do so with the intention to strengthen ourselves for worship. And then even then, there's different degrees of what we do when we relax. Some of them become questionable, where they start to maybe become offensive, and some of the things that people do are impermissible. But the closer that they can be to what is recommended, even if it's permissible, and alhamdulillah that the methodology that we studied from is that they make the permissible things that are fun in of themselves acts of devotion. And you're relaxing, but it's an act of devotion. SubhanAllah. With beautiful spiritual poetry and companionship and different things that can be done. So then we'll go back to what the English that you have here. About his early studies, Imam An-Nawawi said, "It occurred to me to study medicine. So I bought the Qanun of Ibn Sina, whereupon darkness filled my heart and I remained unable to work for several days. Then I came to my senses and sold the Qanun, after which light filled my heart." And this doesn't mean that this was a manual that many of the scholars studied, but this was because Allah Ta'ala had other plans for Imam An-Nawawi. It wasn't meant for him to do that. And it doesn't mean that we're not supposed to study that, or that many of the scholars in Islamic history have also studied this, right? But it meant that Allah Ta'ala had that something and other plans for him. So you see the comment, Sheikh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda commented, "In this way does Allah Most High create in souls attraction for one type of knowledge and aversion to another, proficiency in one and deficiency in another. And in this there are great examples of wisdom, both hidden and manifest." Right? Because this was his path and this is what he should be doing. And then he lists Imam An-Nawawi's teachers. Some of these great imams that he studied with, and you can take a look at that. And then he goes to mention his daily schedule. So Imam An-Nawawi's student, Ala ad-Din Abu Hassan ibn Attar, that's the one who we mentioned, who wrote the biography, said that the Imam every day read before his sheikhs the following. And we know that he had 12 durus. So how many do you all have a day? Right? Every day, 12 durus. And look what he says. He says that in every single one of these durus, is that not only would he review, not like us, we just like quickly review, okay, khalas. Yani, he would study it extensively and know it thoroughly and do all of the necessary research that needed to be done to fully understand the particular legal issues that he's and the other points that he's studying. Right? So he would simultaneously review for what he had already taken, and then he would prepare for his lessons, 12 lessons a day. And so this is a list of them. He would do 2 classes a day in Imam al-Ghazali's Al-Wasit, which is in Shafi fiqh. One in Abu Ishaq's Al-Muhadhab. This is also a book of Shafi fiqh. One in Ibn Jinni's Al-Lum'a in grammar. One in Jama' Bain al-Sahihain in hadith. One on Sahih Muslim. One in Ibn Abu Ishaq's Al-Lum'a and Al-Fakhr Razi's Al-Muntakhab in the principles of jurisprudence. One in Ibn Sakit's Islah al-Mantiq on philology. One in morphology, one in the principles of jurisprudence, one in hadith narrator criticism, and one in Islamic doctrine. Subhanallah. And there's more details that they'll mention in other books about all of this. So then he mentions some of the students of Imam An-Nawawi that you have listed there. The great orator Imam Sadr al-Din Sulaiman al-Ja'far, Imam Shihab al-Din al-Irbidi, Imam Ibn Abi al-Fatih, and the hadith master Imam al-Mizzi, whose book is still used to this day in terms of understanding the hadith narrators. And so the interesting thing is, in the biography, other biographies will mention up to 10 of his students, and he has many others, but 10 that were especially known, which also indicates is that really to transmit knowledge to the next generation, even though someone might have a lot of students, there's usually only a handful or 2 handful of students that really have the discipline and do what is necessary over an extended period of time to really succeed that particular sheikh or teacher in relation to his knowledge. And that a lot of people might benefit, but there's degrees. But usually the great imams, there's only a few, there's not too many that really take from them and then convey that knowledge to the next generation. So Ibn Attar is one of them, but he says here, as for me, this is Ibn Attar saying, him studying from Imam An-Nawawi. So that فَقَرَأْتَ عَلَيْهِ الْفِقْهِ تَصْحِيحًا وَعَرْضًا وَشَرْحًا وَضَبْطًا خَاصًا وَعَامًا. These are technical terms, but essentially is that I read fiqh with him. And it wasn't like we were just like looking through books and this is it. No. Tashihan, right? In painstaking detail and that looking very carefully and all up to the different positions with that dabt of everything and making sure that everything was put in its proper place and correctly understood in a general way and in a specific way. And that giving weight to certain positions more so than other positions and looking deeper into the principles of legal theory and that giving preference to some narrations over others because of the strength of those narrations and all the other sciences that are required to do this. So when he says he studied fiqh, it wasn't like just kind of quickly going through like some of the basics. They studied in depth. And he says, look at how he says, what was his experience of studying with Imam An-Nawawi? وَكَانَ رَحِمَهُ اللَّهُ رَفِيقًا بِي شَفِيقًا عَلَيْهِ. He was very gentle with me and very merciful. That لا يمكن أحدا من خدمتي لا يمكن أحدا. So he wouldn't even let anyone else serve him other than me. And he says that I had to على جهد مني. I had to work hard to have him accept me as someone who would serve him. And he said, because that I'd actually would ask him to serve him. And then he would look carefully, he would look after me in my harakat and sakanat. He would look after me, that in everything that is that I did. Literally your harakat are all your movements, and your sakatat are your moments of stillness. But this is the way that the true teachers are. It's not just about learning the knowledge. They look after you. They take care of you. They're concerned about you. وَلُطْفُهُ بِي فِي جَمِيعِ ذَلِكَ. Even though this is a human being, people have whatever it is that they're experiencing, is that he says he was extremely gentle with me, lutf, in all of that. وَتَوَاضُعُ مَعِي فِي جَمِيعِ الْحَالَاتِ. And he would have, even though he's a student, he would be extremely humble with me in all of these different states. And then he would teach me adab in everything. And that, he says, that I'm unable to fully detail everything that I benefited from and how it was to study with him. Now, and then one last bit here is that he says that, and this is Imam An-Nawawi himself speaking, saying this to Ibn Attar, is that he said he would never waste time during the day or night. His preoccupation was in knowledge. He says even when he was walking, right, to get somewhere or going home, is that you would find him that he would be repeating things that he memorized, or he would be reading, or he would be reviewing in some way. And he said that he would remain like this for 6 years. And again, is that we've been saying this all along, this time that Allah Ta'ala has blessed you all with, it's a short period of time. How you use this time now is going to determine everything else that comes after it. Take advantage of the opportunity to use your time well, right? Spend your time reviewing, studying. Do everything that you can possibly do to master what it is that you are learning right now. And then after this period of intense study, he said then is that he preoccupied himself with writing books, in teaching, and benefiting the Muslims. And he says, and on the side of all of this, everything that he's doing for da'wah, for helping people, serving people, advising the rulers, and teaching people, spreading knowledge, he says, مَا هُوَ عَلِيمٍ الْمُجَاهَدَ بِنَفْسِهِ, is that how he was striving against his own soul and working upon himself spiritually and forcing himself to put into practice the daqa'iq of fiqh, even the subtleties of fiqh. وَالْإِجْتِهَادَ عَلَى خُرُوجٍ مِنْ خِلَافِ الْعُلَمَاءِ, that he would try to avoid anything that the scholars had differed on. And that he was very intent on the actions of the heart and making sure that his intentions were that sincere. And he said, in taking himself to account for every thought that came to his heart. This is why these people are so great. Is that in addition to their scholarship, they were the most pious of people. Their hearts were totally pure. They desired nothing other than the noble countenance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is what motivated them to do what it is that they did. And then we get into his asceticism and extremely simple living. Imam An-Nawawi was a strict ascetic in the manner of the early Muslims, neither eating nor sleeping except out of necessity. He fasted continually through the year, eating a simple dish at nightfall and drinking some water before dawn. This he did once every 24 hours, so one meal a day. And again, sometimes you don't believe that this is possible, but I literally, anyone who has seen someone like Marabat al-Hajj, this is how he was. He would rarely ever eat, like rarely ever eat. And it seemed that sometimes he wouldn't go days without eating other than drinking milk in the morning and the evening. And I remember in Mauritania is that they usually only ate 2 meals a day, which was the way that the companions and the early people used to eat. They didn't have breakfast, lunch, and dinner 3. Usually it was 2. Usually because of practical reasons of light, they would eat a meal before Dhuhr and before Maghrib. Right? And our Prophet ﷺ, if he ate before Dhuhr, usually didn't eat in the evening. He had 1 meal a day. That was his general way of doing things. If he ate later, he wouldn't eat earlier, unless that he had guests, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he'd take part with him so that they could take part in that meal. But they didn't have 3 meals like we have. They would have 2 meals usually. But then I remember in Mauritania, there would be students who were, that some of the excelled students who were trying to emulate the taqwa of their teachers, where they were going from 2 meals to 1 meal a day. Right? And Sheikh Muhammad Noor, many of you some of you might have seen, is that he used to have one meal a day. One meal. And we're not talking about a lavish meal. We're talking about couscous with a little bit of butter in it. Bas. And I remember one time being with him, and he liked people to eat with him. So they would make the food in Marabta Hajj's camp, and they would give it to him. And then he would just take it. It would be like a little stainless steel bowl. And I just happened to be with him, and we just plopped down like in the middle of the sand. Nothing underneath it, not even under in his tent or something. Just eat the meal right there. Eat a little bit. Khalas, khalas. He went his way, I went my way, khalas. And so these people exist. They're not just in books. These people exist. And those that we don't know about that are still like this are significantly more than all those that we do know about. Thus he did once every 24 hours. He avoided moist foods, such as fruit and cucumber, in order not to induce drowsiness. He dressed austerely, owning only one long shirt and a small turban. There's no need for a spring cleaning if that's all you own, right? Think about how much junk and stuff you and I accumulate in our homes. That's why most of the cars around here are in the driveways and on the street, because there's not enough room to store anything else. Just, okay, I'm going to fill up your garage now. Even though you have basement storage and you have attic storage, and still it's not enough, so let's fill up our garage with stuff. And khalas. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Think about how much time we waste on stuff, and then something breaks, and then you have to fix that, and this breaks, and you have to fix that, and then, I mean, I'm not saying we go home and but like, if you have a common house that everyone has, like around here, and you have a gas fireplace and a water softener and an HVAC system and washer, and all of these things break at some point. And we just think of how much time that we spend on worldly things that are essentially luxuries, yani. Anyhow, he says he divided his time between worship and learning. So I was planning to move a little bit faster, but this is just really too interesting. I really wanted to bring out from the richness of his biography. So we'll pause there and continue his biography bi'idhnillahi ta'ala tomorrow. One of the other things we're going to, there's this really cool book, this really beautiful book by one of the students of Habib Omar. His name is Sidi Bandar Faisal. And he titled it Sifat Ahlillah, the traits of the people of Allah. And essentially what he does is, he goes through the various verses of the Quran, and he says, Humul ladina, the righteous, the people of Allah, are who? They are those who, and then he'll take meanings from the verses. So he doesn't just quote the verses, he just takes the meanings. So hum alladhina yu'minuna bil ghayb. They are those who believe in the unseen. Wa yuqimuna as-salah. And so he goes through various chapters of the Quran, pulling out the traits of the people of Allah, where Allah Ta'ala that tells us this is how we should be. And so we'll probably just read like a page or two of this because it's really beneficial. And so they're based on verses of the Quran, and essentially just what are these traits? So like when we recite in Surah Al-Baqarah, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ. So here he changed it, بِمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى رَسُولِ اللَّهِ مُحَمَّدٍ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. So he just gets right to what the trait actually is, and this is of very profound benefit. As you can see, there's a lot of traits in here, and so we'll just be going over that in the beginning of class for just a few minutes, and then get to Tibyan. May Allah Ta'ala bless us, protect us, and preserve us. And bless this month, Ya Allah, to be one of the blessed months, the most blessed Ramadans of our life, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us to be from the elect of those who expose themselves to the sweet breezes of His mercy, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen.